Sandy Hook. Those two words, they bring back horrible memories for everyone, but they're still especially raw in Connecticut and for the governor of Connecticut. We discuss that and more in part two of our conversation. You received pretty prestigious acknowledgement of the Profile in Courage, the JFK Profile in Courage. I remember we're talking about the story about the Syrian refugees, and I believe it was the Indiana governor, Mike Pence, who said, not in my state. And they closed the doors to a pre-approved Syrian family that was looking for a place, frankly, to go. You said, come to Connecticut. Given what's happened in Brussels and the ongoing threat that's there, have you ever had a second thought that you made the right choice?
No, I haven't had a second thought. I think the problem at the time was we had a whole bunch of governors who hadn't taken the time to understand the refugee process. So these are individuals who go through up to 24 months of screening. And by the way, we're taking a very small number, so we get the cream of the crop, if you will. They have multiple interviews, separate, together, families, separately again, you know, looking for falsehoods or you know, things that don't make sense. They're the most screened refugees in the world. Now, you raised Brussels, and so understand that the people who've been arrested in France and Brussels are citizens of France and Brussels, having been born in that country.
But you know the fear, the greater idea, where do the migrants go that are looking for home, and how thorough is the screening? You spoke to it as related to the folks who settled in Connecticut, but there will be an ongoing debate or a conversation as to not in my backyard or where should they resettle. And
sure, and all I'm saying is that we should honor our long-term commitments. This all started in 1951 as a result of a failure to have relocated refugees from the Second World War, many of whom were Jewish.
Yep.
We entered into agreements on an international basis. We need to honor those international agreements, otherwise the terrorists have won.
You mentioned the international landscape. I know you're not running for re-election this year, but can you remember a more bizarre year? Inexplicable. You guys are going to be up pretty soon in the primary process yourselves, but just we're seeing it in New York for the next week and change now. You can't make this stuff up if you tried.
Yeah, I mean the Republican who's going to win in New York by at least current polling numbers is a train wreck. You know, an unmitigated train wreck. He says sexist things, he says racist things, he says things that, you know, in a normal year would set your hair on fire, but somehow it makes him popular in the current Republican Party. And in my own party, you have somebody who's promising everything for free and has taken them a long way. I guess apparently, you know, free sells. But I think when everything is said and done, you know, Hillary Clinton will be the nominee of the Democratic Party, in part because she actually got guns right, as opposed to Senator Sanders. Guns are very important to me, gun safety, and I'm the guy who had to tell those families that they weren't going to be reunited at Sandy Hook School that day, and siding with the NRA was a gigantic mistake. Listen, he can point to things that he disagrees with the Secretary of State on. I could probably point to things I disagree with the Secretary of State on, but getting guns wrong and just turning yourself over the NRA is not one of the things that makes any sense to me.
You mentioned obviously Sandy Hook, and I've been struck. We've been fortunate that families that lost loved ones have come in and shared their stories with grace that I don't think I could have. Are you still haunted by the day, I wonder, where you had to sit down and tell the families, you know, the impossible thing to say, especially from people that I've spoken to that were there and saw some of those?
Well, in point of fact, I wasn't sitting down. I was standing up in front of a room full of people who suspected but didn't know whether they had lost a loved one, whether it was someone's wife, someone's mother, or someone's baby. And yeah, that's a life-changing experience, and it's something that will be with me forever. I wish that hadn't been the case. The reality is that the police authorities weren't going to tell them that. Because in the police work, you don't confirm that someone's dead until you have a identification, and we weren't going to have identification for many hours. But I thought the cruelty of the circumstances requiring people to remain at the firehouse didn't make any sense. And so I would do it again if I had to, and hopefully I won't have to.
One of the things that struck me was in this bizarre political year, at one point Ted Cruz took an AR-15, a weapon that was used on that awful day in Connecticut, and he wrapped a piece of bacon around it and shot it to show that you could have bacon as a result, grinning at the camera.
Yeah.
Listen, I know there's edges of this country that will never agree on anything, but do you think if you had him or a lot of people who have spoken, some would say insensitively in the aftermath of the tragedy, if they were with you that day, would minds be changed?
Yes, I think they would. But let me give this to the American people. They actually get it. They support universal background checks. It's just NRA fanatics and the politicians they own that don't get it. And Ted Cruz is one of them. The American people overwhelmingly support universal background checks. I mean, listen, I'm the governor of the state of Connecticut. I can't get on a plane without someone doing a background check on me. But we allow folks who have had experienced mental challenges. We allow people who have restraining orders. We allow people who are on the terrorism watch list to buy guns in America. Doesn't make any sense.
Coming up next, guns and politics and the intersection of the two. We will talk about both with Governor Malloy right after this.